thank you for returning to Mrs. Mummy Penny Talks. We are now on to episode 5 of my latest season 6, which is the big questions. And I have another guest sat next to me virtually, which is Sarah Williams, otherwise known as Det Camel, which you've been Det Camel for a very long time. We will come to talk about what you do and what you've done in your life and what you do now. But you are my go-to person on anything debt. You are the person I think that knows the most about debt in this country, and you are the perfect person to ask on the podcast to answer the big question: my debt has got out of control. Because I'm answering big questions that I often get messaged to me on social media, and the questions, they're not all about money. Some of them are about life, career, being a woman, but this one, debt is a really common question that drops into my inbox because I've been so public about my debt story, and I know you will get that question multiple times, probably a day. But yes, that's what our episode is all about. Sarah, please introduce yourself, tell us who you are and a little bit about you and how come you know so much about debt.
Thanks for the invite, Lynn. When you told me what the subject was, what the big question was, I was really interested because you're right, it is such a common question. And there are sort of layers because not everybody is asking it at quite the same point in their debt journey, but it's a really great question. I used to work in the city, nothing to do with retail finance. Then I retired from that, became a stay-at-home mum with my 2 kids and started volunteering at my local Citizens Advice. And that's where I got really interested in debt, because many advisors at Citizens Advice cover everything, but others like to sort of specialise. And very soon I decided debt was the area I was most interested in. That was 20 years ago. And after a while, 11 years ago now, I decided that I was tired of people coming to see me too late at Citizens Advice, at the point where things were really, really at the crisis point. And if they had just taken some advice or asked some basic questions a year earlier or 6 months earlier, they could have much better options. So that's why I put up the Det Camel website.
Brilliant.
The aim was to give good, solid debt advice, but in a common sense way, with a few pictures and a few exclamation marks and the things you don't get from, the very great websites like National Debtline and Citizens Advice.
Yeah, no, your website's incredible. It's just got so many resources on there and templates for letters and all kinds of things. But let's sort of start sort of macro, bigger picture. And if we sort of discuss, what is debt and what does that word mean? What are the different types of debt? What's good debt and what's bad debt?
Okay, debt is when you owe somebody money. I mean, you may think if somebody gives you a present, you need to give them back another present. That's a sort of different debt. Here we're talking about just financial debt. And the distinction between good debt and bad debt is kind of your decision to make. But the one which most debt advisors would use is that good debt is something which gets you something which you need and which will improve your life and which you can repay affordably within a time scale for what the thing that you're buying. So if you're buying a house, you get a 25 or 30-year mortgage. The house is still going to be there in 30 years' time. Yeah. Hopefully you haven't let it fall down. So you're buying something solid that's going to be an asset you can live in and not pay rent in, hopefully for the rest of your life. So you're buying something useful. And it doesn't matter that you're taking out a mortgage for a very long time, providing you can afford the repayments, obviously. Similarly, student loans. Obviously, they've got horribly expensive, but for many people, you are still buying an education, which will be a route into a job you cannot do otherwise. So you're buying an asset, that education, and it's useful. A car to get you to work. You don't actually need a £40,000 car to get to work, but still, car finance on a car to get you to work, if it's not too expensive, can be good. But if you're putting a pair of shoes on a credit card, and you're only paying the minimum payment, the shoes are probably history after 3 years at the most, if you like them and you wear them. but you're still making those minimum payments to the credit card 10, 20, 30 years later in some cases, depending on the credit card. So there you're taking on a lot of debt for a lot longer than the actual shoes have lasted for. And I wouldn't say that's good debt at all.
And the amount of interest you pay on those different forms of debt you've just described, it almost goes in the reverse order, doesn't it? So you're going to pay a lower amount of interest on a mortgage. We have this issue at the moment with high interest rates that people are renewing their mortgages into, which is me next year. Great. I'm praying for interest rates to come down. I really
you should be lucky a bit, but they may not come down as much as you hope.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we've talked about this sort of offline. My mortgage renewal is April next year, and yeah, I'm worried, but yeah, I'm just gonna have to suck it up. Which a lot of people are in that position already. You know, they've had to take on another 2-year mortgage at 5% compared to their 1.5%. So yeah, mortgages have lower interest rates, and then student loans, I don't actually know. It's a little bit higher than mortgage rates, isn't it? But it's
student loans is sort of linked to the inflation rate, so they really went up the interest rates, but they should be dropping again.
Yes.
So this coming year.
And then car loans again. I mean, the thing is all these different interest rates, they vary depending on your credit rating as well.
Absolutely.
So
good credit rating, and you can get a car on 5 or 6% interest. Bad credit rating, and people can pay 30% more.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've got cars on like 0% in the past, that, when I obviously had a really, really good credit rating. Interestingly, my credit rating's falling at the moment because I don't have any debt.
That's a different question. That's not quite today's subject. That's a different podcast, I think.
Yeah. So, but you might have a credit card that's got a credit card. Sorry, my voice is very croaky because I'm a little bit tired and ill with lack of sleep. You might have a credit card interest rate of 25-30%. Like the average APR in a credit card has got a lot higher. And of course, you might have an overdraft. Overdrafts have very high interest rate. And then you've got personal loans, which again, they're a little bit lower down because they tend to be over a longer period of time. And then I suppose once you go into more, how do we describe the darker side of loans?
Subprime.
Thank you. So you get these dodgy adverts popping up saying, come and get this female loan, especially for women, mums who need some money.
Mums over 35 or whatever,
And when you
in
look at
very small print, it says APR 30%, and that means half of them are more than 30%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when you see that standard interest rate quoted, it's very rarely what you end up actually paying. So that's depend on your credit rating, which
definitely.
What credit rating is simply.
Okay, a credit rating is from a credit reference agency who sees what your past history on credit is. So every time you make a loan repayment or a mortgage repayment or minimum payment to your credit card, it gets recorded, and so do some things like utility bills as well. And it's an assessment of how likely you are to default on new credit you take out. So if it's scored out of 1,000 and you're scoring 900 plus, basically they don't think you're going to default on that one. If it's scored out of 1,000 and you're scoring 400, they think it's really incredibly risky to lend you more money. So it's just a one number which is trying to summarize all your past credit history, which can be very unfair because you could have had real big problems in your past and you're now past that. You don't have them anymore, but you've still got the problems showing on your credit report normally for 6 years.
Yeah. So going back to the big question then, what is problem debt? What is debt that is out of control?
Okay, so when people come to me and they say, Sarah, I've got a big debt problem, can I chat to you about it? I never know what they're going to say next. They may say, my credit cards have got up to £3,000, or they may say, I can't really add it up, but it's over £75,000. Different people have completely different sort of levels about what they think problem debt is. But if you're worrying about your debt, it is a problem, because that worry is always there in your head, and it's good to get rid of that, if nothing else. Even if a debt advisor isn't going to think it's the most serious problem they've seen all week, it's a real problem for you. So I would say debt is a problem if it's worrying you, particularly if you're find yourself shuffling money around during the month, to try to make sure you can make the minimum payment to the credit card and pay the bills, and then you have to put perhaps essentials like petrol or food back on the credit card because you're short of money. That is a real problem. It's also a real problem if it's going up every month. Even if you're not that worried about it, an upward trend in the amount of debt you've got is kind of an early warning signal that at some point you are going to be having problems paying those, because you can't keep on borrowing money each month to pay for the important things in life, the essentials. At some point, somebody's going to stop lending you money, or you'll be reduced to borrowing from one of those really horrible, incredibly expensive loans, and then things can go very bad very fast.
Yeah. Can we just, at this point, touch on a sort of brief outlook? Because I think that will just bring it to life for people. I had problem debt because I was thinking about it probably 50 times a day. Back in, and it's after, so I think we met in about 2015. I'm pretty sure it was way back. And I remember us we went out for like dinner near Leadenhall Market, I think. And we were talking about my levels of debt, and you just sort of lit a bit of a spark in my mind where you said, oh, you might struggle that's going to affect mortgage applications because you've got like £10,000 on a credit card. And I sort of heard you say it, but I didn't really think, oh, I better do something about it. You just planted the seed. And then about a year later or whatever it was, that debt had gone up to 16,000 because my business, Mrs. Mommy Penny, had just been born and it wasn't earning enough money to sustain the lifestyle we were living. I mean, there was circumstances where I was paying for food for my kids on my credit card, but I just buried my head in the sand. It'll go away. Of course, it never goes away. So it came to 16,000, and that's when I took my head out of the sand. I think it was turning 40 that was the prompt that made me think I need to sort it out, because I'd been in credit card debt my entire adult life until that point. Because I always just thought it'll be paid off at some point. Some money will come from somewhere. I was quite sort of laissez-faire about it. But of course, £16,000 of debt when I was self-employed, and at that time I was probably bringing in like 20, 30 grand a year from my business. I could not afford that debt. I could only just afford the minimum payment. So it was a problem debt for me, but it wasn't out of control because I could still afford the minimum payments. And then the steps I took were the sensible steps that we recommend to people all the time for when you can sort of sort it out yourself. So I stripped all my bills back. I deleted directs I didn't need. We started to shop at Aldi rather than Tesco's. I used to take away coffees out rather than buying coffees in the shop. I had a no spend months. I'm not sure they're always a great idea because it does encourage you to overspend the next month. But yeah, I tried really hard to pay it off, and I also increased my income. So my business kicked off and I started to earn more than 25, 30 grand a year. So I was able to pay that debt off in 2 years. And I have to be really honest, I didn't pay off 16 grand in 2 years through cutting my cost. A big chunk of it was my increase in my income.
Yeah. But doing two different things which were both helping, and that gets you into sort of a good reinforcing cycle rather than a bad one, which is just, well, I'll get another credit card and put some more stuff on there, because that sort of debt merry-go-round stops in the end.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the thing that filled me with, because I used to switch from 0% deal to 0% deal every 2 years, in my 20s and 30s. But then I became self-employed and I just sort of thought, what if they stop offering me these deals and I'm going to be laden with 16 grand's worth of debt at 20% interest or 25% interest. As it was, I managed to, I think about 10 of it was on 0%. And maybe 5 of it was interest paying. So I made sure I paid off the debt that had the interest charging on it first, which,
Yeah,
now let's get this right, that's the snowball method.
that's avalanche method, but it's really snowball and avalanche are pretty much the same, really. I wouldn't get hung up on them.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I just kept going, but it was a really miserable 2 years. Really
Yeah.
miserable. And I stopped everything. And also I told the children what I was doing. Because they needed to know that they couldn't, just ask for money here and there because they
The older ones were also old enough to understand, weren't they? At that point, you can't really say that sensibly to a 5 and 6 year old, but
no, no. But it was just having that discussion of, oh, we can't afford to have a really expensive holiday this year.
yeah,
At some point down the line, hopefully it'll be fine. But it's not filling your children with worry and panic. You're just sort of sharing the
no,
reality of the
it's a
situation.
good life lesson, really. They heard you say that, and they knew that a few years later you were out of that, and they were having nice holidays again.
Uh,
It's actually a good thing for children to hear, for parents to say in a positive way, "I can't afford that at the moment. I hope we can do it in a couple of years' time."
yeah. So I had that debt really affected my mental health.
Yeah,
Um, and if I'm honest, I think it had quite a lot to do with the divorce in the end, because the debt was paid off, and we actually separated about 2 months after that massive debt was paid off. So that was interesting.
it's hard to disentangle these things, which caused which, and because the causations can all run different ways. But debt affects so many people's mental health. If you've got problem debt, it's a rare person that isn't affected by it, in the sense that they do keep thinking about it. Not very many people can manage to very easily, if they don't have a plan to get out of debt, to muddle through and just keep debt in a sort of little box that they don't worry about. If you don't have a plan, it tends to keep popping up at all points of the day.
Mm, yeah, or wakes you up in the middle of the night and gives you
Yeah,
insomnia
that's the
and stuff.
worst.
Yeah. So I sort of touched on my method of how I
Mm,
paid
yeah.
my debt back, but like, is that like, say if you put your Citizens Advice Bureau old hat on, is that the process you'd go through with your clients who had manageable debt that they could afford to pay back?
Yes. So the first step with a client, any debt client, is to look at their income and their expenditure. It's more complicated if somebody's self-employed and has an erratic income. But so you've got your income, you've got your expenditure, and you can divide the expenditure into the essential household stuff. And much though you'd like to get the council tax and the rent down, it's really hard to do it, and you can't do it quickly. On the other hand, you can cancel Netflix, or your food box subscription, or something you may not want to, but if you have to, you can cancel those. So you trim it down into essential bills and essential living costs, which is food for you, the kids, school uniform, clothes, particularly. For the
Mm,
children, I mean, adults can normally get through a whole year without buying any clothes. They may
yeah.
not want to, but they could do it. But children's feet keep growing. Transport, getting the children to school, other school costs, dentists, haircuts, prescriptions, cars. Cars are a money pit, even if you don't have one on finance. The road tax, the servicing, the MOT, and what if it breaks down? So you divide things up into these sections and you say, is this adding up? Not looking at the debts at the moment. The only debts you would include are the essentials like mortgage and car finance at this stage. Looking at that lot, have you got enough money to cover everything there? If you haven't, is there anything you could really cut down if you have to? No. If you have to go through and cross things out, Lynn, what would you actually cross off this list? Because you went through and you cancelled some direct debits. I don't know what they were for, but most people, when they actually look at their bank statements, some of them are even surprised at some of the money that's going out. So you look at what you're doing. If you've got a partner, talk to your partner as well. You know, you suddenly find you're both paying for a Spotify subscription when you could get a family one. So do it with your partner. Trim the easy stuff to trim. Does that get you back into the black? Then perhaps look at what else you could trim if you had to. You went through a bad 2 years. It was your choice to get out the other side. And that is a great decision for so many people if you can do it. But if you can't do that apart from trying to live on baked beans and baked potatoes for 2 years and not have any money for the kids and just cross your fingers and hope nothing goes wrong with the car, that's not going to work for 2 years. No. It really isn't. So at that point, if you don't have enough money, you can't do what you did, which was snowball your debts, which is where you pay the minimum to all the debts, apart from what your target debt is, and you throw all your spare money at that target debt. So your target debt was your credit cards that were charging you interest, first of all, to get those gone, so you weren't wasting money on interest, and then presumably the rest of the credit cards after that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you said you weren't that worried when your debt on 0%. People think 0% credit cards are going to go on forever. They may not. You never know when they're not going to do it. They do count for when you're going for a mortgage. £20,000 on 0% interest may not bother you too much to the mortgage company. It's £20,000 credit card debt, whether you're paying interest or not, and it will reduce the amount of mortgage they'll give you. Yeah. So that's snowballing. You pick a target debt and you throw lots of spare money at that. You can do this at the start of the month when you get paid. Think I'm going to overpay it by an extra 100 or 200 over what the minimum is. And what I really like is if when you're going through a month, if you find it's going reasonably well, you might think, well, I could make a little extra payment. And I call those snowflake payments, as a sort of, like the snowballing, only it's little tiny. And if you're doing those snowflake payments, it's getting your card debt down fast. That also improves your credit score, getting credit card debt down. Overpaying the loans doesn't, but overpaying the credit cards does. And so and it gives you a psychological boost as well, because it's making you feel that this 2-year journey, or however long it's going to be, is really long and tedious, but it gives you a bit of a boost knowing that you're doing something to help that along in the middle of the month. You're not just saying, oh, well, I can wait till the next month and I can pay another chunk off. And you find your whole life is just one series of waiting for the next payday. So I like snowflake payments, and people that use them a lot can find them very motivating. That's snowballing. If you don't have enough income to pay the minimum payments and all your essentials, including things like clothes and car servicing, then it's not going to work. You could do it for 2 or 3 months and cross your fingers nothing goes wrong. But if it's going to take longer than that to clear your debts, and for most people it will, you need a better plan.
Yeah.
And there you get different sorts of plans depending on how bad your debt situation is. But the most common one is where people say to me, I could manage if it wasn't for the interest that was being added.
Yeah.
And there the answer for you is a debt management plan or a payment arrangement with the creditors. They're actually exactly the same thing. A debt management plan is run by a debt management company, and they make the payment arrangements with all your creditors. So you would just pay Step Change. They're the biggest provider of debt management plans in the country and one of the best. You pay Step Change one payment a month of, say, £250, which may have been an awful lot less than the £500 or £600 that your minimum payments were. Step Change, divide that between your creditors. They pay all your creditors and ask them to stop interest. That sounds a bit feeble, ask them to stop interest. But these days, creditors almost always do, because they've been told by the regulator, cost of living crisis, guys, you've got to treat your customers fairly. So it's really, really unusual for a credit card company or a bank giving you an overdraft or something not to stop interest. It's normally because they've made an administrative error if they carry on charging, and you can complain if they do. So a debt management plan, it freezes the debt, so you're paying less, but it's all taking your debt down. None of it's being wasted on paying interest.
Brilliant.
And if you've only got a couple of debts, if you've just got 2 credit cards, you could do it yourself. Phone the companies up yourself and say, can I have a payment arrangement? Please freeze interest. I can only pay you this. Here's my income and expenditure, so you can see I'm not, I'm serious about this, and I've looked at it. But if you've got more than a couple of debts, it's quite a hassle talking to your creditors yourself. Yeah. And you need to do it normally every 6 months. Every 6 months, they want to know, how's your situation, Lynn? Has it got better? Has it got worse? Whereas if you go to Step Change do all of that routine stuff, and you just make one payment, and it's so much easier.
And Step Change is a charity at that. It's free.
It is, yes. There are several providers of free debt management plans in this country. Step Change, Pay Plan, Christians Against Poverty. You should never, ever pay a firm for a debt management plan. There are quite a few around at the moment, and they charge a lot of money. They're taking, say, £50 of your payment every month just for their fees. And that means that if you're only paying them £120 a month, your debt management plan's going to take nearly twice as long to finish, because the money isn't going to creditors. You can have exactly the same plan with Step Change. You do exactly the same thing. They deal with all your creditors for you. No more hassle going through Step Change than somebody who charges you fees. Never pay. And if anyone's listening to this now who's stuck with one of these debt management plan companies that charges fees, talk to Step Change, because you can switch to them and stop
amazing. Fees. That's I didn't even think of that. That's brilliant. So what if you've got to the point where you've missed a few payments, and you're starting to get phone calls and letters, and I suppose we maybe need to look at the different types of debt, because some debts are very high priority and then other debts are lower priority.
Yeah. So to a debt advisor, a high priority debt is one where bad things happen if you don't pay it. I mean, it's not good if you don't pay your credit card, but in practice, it will take a couple of years or more for you ever to be taken to court for CCJ for that. It can take a very long while. It's probably never going to happen if you start paying them a minimum offer them an amount you can afford each month, even if it's quite low. But other debts, priority debts, bad things happen quite fast if you don't pay them. Top of the list is rent and mortgage. You don't want to get into rent arrears. Most people, I think, instinctively know that. Nobody has to tell them that paying the rent is important. But below that, there is council tax, which doesn't often seem like that important debt. It doesn't show on your credit records, and they don't tend to phone you up and hassle you or send you texts if you haven't paid, but they will go to court and send round bailiffs faster than any other creditor in the country. You could easily get bailiffs sent round within 6 months to a year of stopping paying council tax debt in some areas. Some areas are a little bit slower than that, but they are much, much faster than what I call consumer credit, debt where you actually went out and you borrowed the money. That's consumer credit. All these other priority debts you didn't actually borrow money, you just got into arrears on bills.
Yeah.
Then there's arrears on energy bills, arrears on water, and things which are technically problem debts, but which are really important for you. If you just stop paying your broadband, they're going to cut it off.
Yeah.
So things which, in theory you can live without, in practice, modern day life doesn't work if you don't have a mobile and don't have broadband. So those are the really essential bills. They don't go into a debt management plan. You need to keep up to date with those. And if you've got arrears, you need to make an arrangement with your energy firm or with the council to pay those arrears back, and then you'll have less money left because of that, which means that your consumer debts like credit cards and catalogues and overdrafts and loans from banks, they're going to get even less. But those are non-priority debts. And if you say to your credit card company, I can't pay you because I've got, I'm getting less hours at work and I've got the car finance and the rent's gone up, they're going to understand. And you say, can I pay you less? Can I pay you £5 a month until I clear my council tax arrears? They will know what you're talking about, and they will accept that it's much more important for you to pay the council tax arrears than it is for you to pay more to your credit card.
Yeah. And so I would imagine if somebody's listening to this now, and if somebody's in that situation, they're going to be like, that was so much information to take in. I'm really anxious. I'm too stressed. I'm going to bury my head in the sand. It's the worst thing you can do, isn't it?
It is, yes.
You like, exactly, go back to exactly what you said at the beginning. You worked for Citizens Advice Bureau and you had people coming to you when it was months down the line, when there were arrears in place, when they'd been going through a years of mental health issues because of their
when they hadn't
money.
opened their post because they were scared to open it. Yeah. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, talk to a debt advisor. They really are good at helping you sort these things out. If you're just feeling a bit scared, give yourself a couple of small things to do. You don't have to tackle it all within the next 3 days. Make a list of your debts. It is scary, but just write them down so you know what the base of the problem is. Go through your bank statements and cancel a few things. You can make some easy steps, and then you can think about, right, I do need to actually think about how much I've got coming in, what I'm spending it all on. Have a look at making a budget for the first time. And if you're struggling with that, again, a debt advisor can help you do it.
Yeah.
But there are different sorts of debt advisors. Shall I talk about?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Who the best people are to talk to depends on your particular situation. So I've got a sort of decision tree of who I send people to if they talk to me. If you're self-employed or you've got a small limited company, then the best people to talk to are Business Debtline, who are an organisation, it's just a charity. It's set up specifically to deal with this sort of debt, and they do it very well. Because when you are self-employed, on your finances, business finances are a bit muddled up with your own personal finances, and they will cover both the business side and the personal side. So Business Debtline, if you're self-employed or you've got a small limited company. And these people often have to cope with erratic incomes as well, which can make a lot of other debt solutions harder. The next group of people are people that have already got arrears on priority bills. If you've got arrears on rent, mortgage, council tax, energy, go to your local Citizens Advice or another local advice agency. Sometimes, almost all local advice agencies that are face-to-face are very good. And they will do more by way of actually phoning up your creditors and talking to them than telephone debt advice services are.
Yeah.
Some people hate the idea of actually seeing somebody face to face and would rather do it on the phone. In that case, there are a couple of good places for phone advice. National Debtline is really good. If you're the sort of person that will be happy to write letters once somebody's talked you through the situation and the pros and cons, and you've got a way forward. If you think I can do this from there on, I can write these letters. National Debtline, it's a sister company to Business Debtline. National Debtline is excellent. And if you're in the situation I mentioned where you think you can cope if they just stop charging interest, then I would go directly to Step Change.
Yeah.
So that's a list of people which, in a way, it's another decision to make. Who do I talk to? But that's quite an easy one to go down to decide who to talk to.
That's really simple. And then Christians Against Poverty, equivalent of Step Change?
Yeah, they are, and they will deal with you if you're not Christian as well. You know they
yeah,
it's they are to different areas because they tend to be based around
yes,
churches, and it may be there's nobody in your area. But
right.
if there is a Christians Against Poverty in your area, they are very good, and they don't ask you what your religion is at all.
And I've done a little bit of sort of work with them, and I'm I'm not a practicing Christian, and we actually had this discussion, and they were like, yeah, just because we're called Christians Against Poverty, that really doesn't matter. We just want to help people. Um, the religion doesn't come into it, but they sort of do it with hearts, and they've got like
Yeah.
it's just a bit more, I don't know, softer, caring. That's how I found. But
All the charities I've mentioned are normally incredibly good. You go to National Deadline or Step Change, or they are not judgmental. They're on your side.
yeah,
They just want you to kind of know what the options are, and they can talk about the pros and cons, so that it's you that can make the decision. If you ever find you're talking to somebody that is pushing you to do something you're not sure about,
yeah,
you're probably not talking to one of these people, because unfortunately there are some bad actors out there that have got websites and social media accounts that look very similar to the big charities. So do make sure who you are actually talking to. And if you
yeah,
see a name at the bottom of something which doesn't look quite like what you're expecting, maybe sort of a bit like National Deadline, but not quite. It's got a couple of extra words in it or something.
yeah,
Don't talk to them at all. Just
yes,
break off contact and go and get the proper phone number and call the real thing.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
sad to have to warn people about this, but if you ever find a debt advisor that is being pushy, I think you should make this decision right now. An IVA, that's a form of insolvency which generates large fees for people. If you find you're being pushed towards doing that, or pushed towards a debt management company that wants to charge you fees, you are not taking debt advice from the best person. It's
yeah,
not in your interest. It's generating fees for the person that's giving you that advice.
yeah. So sad. Can we touch on the the shame and the embarrassment people feel about debt, because it's it's such a taboo subject that people are very scared to admit, um scared to talk to their partners, scared to talk to their friends. It's almost like fake it, fake it, fake it, like keep everything's going to be all right, everything's going to be all right. And you sort of in because I've been in this situation, you internalize it all in your head, and then that just extrapolates the mental health issues, because
It
you're
does,
just
yes,
dealing
yeah,
with it all in
yeah.
your own head. And I just sort of want to say that debt is so common. Like, I mean, I don't know the actual stats, you might, Sarah, but like more than half of the UK population is in some kind of credit card debt. So
Stats
you
are that probably 8 million people have got what is called problem debt, because a credit card
right.
which you pay off in full every month, it's not problem
No.
debt at all. Um,
So
yeah,
8 million people
yeah,
have
yeah,
got problem
yeah,
debt, and that's a huge proportion in
yeah,
this
yeah.
country
I mean,
of
there was a time,
adults.
yeah. So about a year 18 months ago, when energy prices were just going up horrifically, and we had no idea how they were going to be able to afford to keep the lights on. At that point, people there was a little bit of a glimpse where people started talking, because you could go in at work and you could say, you were really scared about your electric bill, and everybody you were talking to would be saying the same thing, and there was quite a bit of solidarity feeling getting amongst
Right.
there. And it would be nice if that happened across for all types of debt. But what I would say is that if you can possibly talk to somebody
Yeah.
about it, it's really great to get moral support. You have to talk to your partner. It's hell trying to clear debt and not let your partner know about it. For a start, when they do find out, they're going to be more upset about the sort of feeling that deception because you didn't tell them than they are about the debt, very obviously. So you've got to talk to your partner. But if you don't have a partner, somebody who's going to listen to what you're saying, and they may even have similar situation. They may be sort of, when somebody says to you, can we go out? How about going out for a drink? And if you say, bit broke, well, why don't you come round to my house and we'll have a bottle of wine? They may be really pleased with that as an offer. And if there's nobody in your life you can really talk to about that, because you can't do it with your kids unless they're really quite old, it's not fair to ask them to. You can tell them what you're doing, but you can't really ask them sensibly to help. Then one thing you can do is say on Instagram, because I tend to hang out on Instagram quite a lot, I'm at Debt Camel, is to get a separate account from your current account on Instagram where you've got pics of your kids and the garden or the dog or whatever. But get a new one, get a separate one under an anonymous name. So, it could be Lynn in Debt or whatever. And somewhere where you can talk openly about your problems and list the debts and say, I think I'm going to target this one first because I'd really like to get rid of this debt to my sister or whatever. So as soon as you do that, you'll find there is a community of people around there. And it's not the same as talking to somebody in real life, but it's also there at 2:00 in the morning. You can go and have a whale at 2:00 in the morning, and by the time you wake up at 6:00, somebody's actually replied to you. So it's much better than nothing, and any sort of support is good to stop this going round in your mind constantly, and the feeling that it's all your fault and you need to be ashamed of this. Our society is designed to get you to spend as much as possible, as fast as possible. Not because it's in your interest, because it's in the interest of the people trying to sell you holidays and experiences and household goods and fast fashion and takeaways. That's how society works.
That's a whole nother episode. Yes. Timmy and I in episode 2 covered a lot of that actually in the What is Happiness episode. And we actually referred to so emotion. The emotion you feel only lasts for 90 seconds, and if you can sit with that anger for 90 seconds, it'll pass. If you can sit with that sadness, but you can also link it to like Instagram shopping. If you can just let that thing sit in your basket for 90 seconds,
or even better, a week.
Or, I mean,
it's a surprise at the end of the week. You often think, bloody hell, I didn't want to buy that. It was a stupid idea.
I will always leave things in a basket for 24 hours and then I'll reflect on it the next day. But I do the same with like when I have to write a complicated, say, legal email or something. I will write it on a Saturday and then I'll sleep on it and I'll go back to it the next day. I think that's a really good principle to sit on quite big decisions, but it's a good principle for money. Cool. That was all my areas I wanted to cover, and we've only gone over by a few minutes, so that's well good. So you already said that people can go and follow you on your Debt Camel Instagram account, which is amazing, and you've got so many engaged followers who comment. So if you go through the comments, you can see all of those anonymous debt accounts that you've mentioned because they all follow you, and then you can really quickly
follow some of them and it's amazing. Instagram works when you chat to people, whether it's in the comments or messages or something.
And your DMs are open, like people can message you personally, and it's you, because I message you quite a lot. I
can't give formal debt advice, but I can talk through somebody's problems and say, I think this just need to cut back on the spending a bit. Leave the credit cards at home, take them out of your Apple Pay, Google Pay, take them off Apple Wallet and things like that. See how it goes in a few months' time. Otherwise I'll say, I think you should talk to Step Change or whatever.
Yeah, which is generally the kind of, DMs I get as well. I mean, occasionally I might get some really bizarre product that I've never heard of, and then I'll DM you, and I'm like, Sarah, have you heard of this really strange product? Because actually, you know what we haven't touched on is buy now, pay later, which is the scourge of current times. I'm so against buy now, pay later. And it's just the
Yeah.
modern day equivalent of catalogues for like 20, 30 years ago, I know.
It
but
is, yeah.
it's causing a lot of issues, and it
It
is
certainly
debt.
is, and some of the banks are getting into it as well. So I mean, I'm seeing
Yeah,
increasing numbers of people having problems with Monzo Flex, which is basically.
that's the one that I messaged you about because I'd not heard
Oh,
of
was
it.
it right? Yeah,
Yeah. You sent me
yeah.
all the, yeah. Yes, yeah. No, I've got a friend of a friend who's got issues with that product. But yes, I think when it comes to ordering a Domino's pizza and paying for that using Klarna or whatever the other companies are called, I can't remember all their names, but don't buy a pizza using a buy now pay later scheme, because you can end up building up loads and loads of them. So you can have a dress with one, pair of shoes with one, a bag with one, pizza with one, and then suddenly
And
you're
it's so
like, oh, this is
confusing
a
because they all
total
come out as
mess.
separate payments, and some of the you think, well, that was finishing soon, but actually it's another couple to go. Or if you use buy now pay later twice a year, it's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
If you're using it every month, then probably part of the reason you're using it this month is because you're still paying for the things that you bought last month on it, and stopping it is honestly the best thing to do in that situation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I am
And
really
if you
not a
can't
fan of.
stop it, that's another sign that you've got problem debt and you need to talk to a debt advisor.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Right, cool, amazing. You also, your website, we have obviously mentioned that as well, but you've got so many resources on there because there's
Yep,
10 years of them.
deckcamel.co.uk.
Have you got anything else that people can?
I'm on Facebook and Twitter, well, sorry, X as we should now call it, but I'm not that active on
Yeah,
there. So it's mostly Instagram
yeah,
and the web. So Instagram for short daily stuff.
yeah,
And the website when I want to put up a longer piece about something. So I don't write regularly I don't do 2 or 3 a week on my website anymore, though I did when I was starting off. Most of that's just morphed onto Instagram. But when I put a
yeah,
long piece where I want to write 1,000 words or something, then the website's a better
yeah.
means to do that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that. That was a wealth of information yet again. I really, really appreciate your time. So many people will listen to this, and if they just pick up one or two tips and make a couple of changes, small changes or big changes, then whatever. It's just we want
Steps in the
people.
right direction is the best way to start.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you ever so much. Everybody, thanks for listening. Please hit the subscribe button on your podcast channels and YouTube. And I will be back again next week with a new episode.